At my own engagement celebration, my father slapped me across the face right in front of about 100 guests because I refused to give my irresponsible brother my entire $70,000 wedding fund. Before I tell you how that one slap sparked an unbelievable corporate showdown that ultimately cost my father his entire company, let me ask, drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. I'm Ethan Miller, 32 years old, and that night was supposed to be the happiest of my life. The Silver Oak restaurant was softly lit, with gentle piano melodies floating through the air, mixing with the low hum of conversations and laughter. Grace, my fiancée, stood beside me, her hand in mine, her smile so radiant it could light up the whole city. We'd poured so much into this, worked tirelessly for years, climbing the ladder as a graphic designer at Horizon Creative, saving every penny, planning for a future I could be proud of, a future with her. All our friends and family were there. Tyler, my best man, was already several drinks in, ready to tell some embarrassing story from our college days. Grace's family, the Chens, had welcomed me with open arms from day one. Her dad, Dr. Liang, a man I held in great respect, had just toasted us in a way that made my eyes water. Even my old college mentor, Professor Green, had driven 3 hours just to be there. The room was filled with love, well, almost. Near the front, my family sat, my dad, Gerald, and my mom, Linda, their faces tight and serious. Next to them sat my younger brother Dylan, slouched in his chair, endlessly scrolling through his phone as if he'd rather be anywhere else. That was Dylan for you. While I was pulling all-nighters trying to earn scholarships and working part-time jobs, he was dropping out of college to chase a crypto dream that ended up crashing and burning, taking a big chunk of our parents' savings with it. But he was still the golden child, always in their good graces. The night was perfect until my dad stood up. He tapped his glass with a fork, the sharp ping cutting through the gentle chatter. A quick word, he announced, a strange smile plastered on his face. The room fell silent as he gave a short, generic congratulations, barely making eye contact with me. Then his tone shifted, cold, firm, and loud enough for everyone to hear. I also have an important family announcement. His voice echoed with authority. After some thought, he said, Linda and I have decided that Ethan's $70,000 wedding fund will be given to his brother Dylan. The room gasped collectively, sucking the air right out of everyone's lungs. Grace's hand gripped mine tighter. This had to be a joke, a cruel joke. Dad, that's not funny, I said, my voice trembling a little. His eyes narrowed. This isn't a joke. Your brother needs it more than you do. I pushed myself up from the chair as it scraped loudly against the floor. That money is legally mine, I earned every cent of it. We planned our wedding and our future with that money. My mother chimed in sharply, Ethan, don't be so selfish. The argument exploded then, voices raised high, ugly words flying across the elegant dining room. And then it happened. As I stood my ground and my final no hung in the air, my father stepped forward. His hand struck my face with a force that echoed like a gunshot. I stumbled backward, feeling my cheek burn, but more than the physical pain, I felt shock deep inside me. The whole room froze in place. Grace screamed my name as silence settled over us. Looking straight into my father's eyes, I kept my voice quiet but steady. You're about to get a surprise you'll never forget. He scoffed and puffed out his chest like a king in his castle. But then, suddenly, the glass doors swung open, and in walked 2 police officers in uniform, their eyes sweeping over the room. My father's smirk faltered. He looked from the police to me with confusion flickering in his eyes. He still didn't get it. He regarded me with pure contempt, not shock or fear, but arrogance, as if I'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Little did he realize he wasn't just looking at his son, he was looking at the man who would bring his entire world crashing down around him. To understand why a father would hit his own son in front of everyone, you've got to understand the years leading up to that moment, how our family's foundation wasn't built on love but on favoritism that had poisoned us for decades. Let me go back just a few hours before all the shouting and sirens. That evening at Silver Oak had started as a dream come true. Grace and I had walked in and saw all those faces, people who genuinely cared about us, and it was overwhelming, in the best way possible. Grace was my anchor. We met 4 years earlier at Horizon Creative. She was a smart marketing strategist, funny and sharp, and we clicked instantly. We weren't just a couple, we were a team. On weekends, we'd hike mountains together, sketch out ideas for our dream home, and crunch numbers on our laptops at our tiny kitchen table, building our future one brick at a time, and every step of that was hard-earned. Tyler was already there when we arrived, holding court at the bar. We'd been through everything since our college days. He was the one who pulled me out of the library to hit parties, I was the one who made sure he studied for finals. Now we were also business partners taking on freelance projects together. Tyler knew my family's situation better than anyone. He'd seen firsthand how casual dismissals and blatant favoritism played out within our family dynamic. "You ready for this tonight?" he asked me as I walked in, slapping me on the back. "Long night of speeches ahead," I joked. "Just keep yours under 10 minutes and don't mention the noodle incident of 2012, then we're good," he grinned. I laughed back, no promises. Then there were the Chens, their presence made everything feel warm and welcoming. Dr. and Mrs. Liang treated me like their own son. Dr. Liang, a respected surgeon, shook my hand firmly and smiled warmly when I asked for his blessing to marry Grace. He didn't question my finances or family background. He simply said, "Ethan, I see how you look at my daughter, I see how you support each other, that's all any father can ask for." Their acceptance hit me like a bomb, something I'd secretly been craving but rarely admitted I needed. My mentor, Professor Green, was also there. He's the one who saw the potential in me, a nervous, quiet kid, in his introductory design class. He helped me land my first internship, wrote a recommendation letter for Horizon, and has been a guiding influence ever since. Seeing him there, looking proud of me, truly meant the world. The people I consider my real family, Grace, Tyler, the Chens, Professor Green, they're the family I've built for myself. Then there's the family I was born into. They arrived late, of course. My father, Gerald, strode in like he owned the place, nodding at people he didn't even know. My mother, Linda, followed behind with a forced smile on her face as she glanced around the room, probably judging the flower arrangements or something similar. Trailing behind them was Dylan. To really understand Dylan, I just need to tell you one quick story. I remember one summer during college when I was working 60 hours a week in a hot, greasy restaurant kitchen. The smell of burnt oil clung to my clothes just to be able to pay for my textbooks for that fall semester. One evening, completely exhausted, I called home, and my mom answered with a frantic voice, "Ethan, thank God you called." Then she said, "It's Dylan. What happened, is he okay?" I asked, my heart pounding in my chest. She brushed me off casually, saying, he's fine." Then she added dismissively that he had just run into some trouble after investing in a new cryptocurrency, claiming it was a guaranteed win. Unfortunately, he lost all of his money and even the cash we had given him for his car payment. I closed my eyes and leaned against the grimy wall of the kitchen, feeling overwhelmed. "Mom, how much does he need?" I asked softly. She replied that it was only a few thousand, mentioning that Dad had already taken care of it. But the real issue was that he was feeling pretty crushed, and she thought I should call him to lift his spirits. I remember hanging up the phone, my hands trembling with a rage I couldn't quite put into words. At that moment, I had only $112 in my bank account, while my brother had just blown through thousands on a whim. And here I was, supposed to be the one to make him feel better. That was the role I played. I was the responsible, self-reliant one, so I was often taken for granted. Dylan, on the other hand, was charming and spontaneous, although that was just code for reckless and irresponsible, so he always seemed to be the one needing saving. He was basically my project, I was just there to help him along. Even my own Uncle Frank, my dad's brother, saw it clearly. Uncle Frank was the opposite of Dad, quiet, practical, an accountant who taught me how to budget, open my first savings account, and invest in simple index funds. He valued hard work and integrity above all else. During family gatherings, he'd pull me aside and say, "Keep building your own life, kid. That's all you can really control." Back at the party, when Dad stood up to give a toast, beneath the surface, all that tension simmered just waiting to burst out. His words were brief and hollow, and then he dropped the bomb: Ethan's $70,000 wedding fund would be given to Dylan instead. The room fell silent, deafening in its shock. I looked over at Grace. Her face was pale with disbelief. Then my gaze shifted to Dylan, who was now looking up from his phone with a smug, entitled grin spreading across his face. It was obvious he had known this was coming. This was a premeditated ambush. "Dad, that's not funny," I managed to say, my voice tight with frustration. I was trying to de-escalate, hoping he'd back down or admit it was some terrible joke. But my father repeated coldly, "This isn't a joke," his voice like ice. "Your brother is getting married in a few months. He and Brianna are just starting out, they need the money more than you do. You and Grace have good jobs." I slowly stood up, every eye in the room fixated on me. "Dad," I said firmly, "that money is legally mine. It's in my name, transferred to me on my 21st birthday. We're using it for our wedding and a down payment on a house." Mom quickly jumped in, "Don't be so selfish, Ethan. Dylan is your brother, family should support family. You've always had more, you've worked harder." Before I could stop myself, the words spilled out: "I worked through college, I saved, I planned everything out. Dylan wasted his entire fund on get-rich-quick schemes and a flashy sports car. This isn't about need, it's about responsibility." Linda snapped sharply, her voice rising, "What business? Another crypto scam?" That's when it happened. I saw my father's face turn bright red with anger. He took 2 quick steps toward me. I knew what was coming but couldn't believe it would happen here, at this moment. The slap cracked loudly through the room, my head jerked sideways. For a second, there was only ringing in my ears and a burning sting on my cheek. The entire room seemed to freeze in shock. Then chaos erupted. Grace screamed my name and rushed over to stand between me and Dad. Tyler shot to his feet, furious. Dr. Leong looked horrified as Brooke quietly raised her phone, a grim expression on her face as she recorded everything. It was in that moment, when I straightened up and met my father's furious glare, that something inside me shattered, or maybe it had finally been forged into something unbreakable. Years of swallowing my anger, accepting injustice, trying to be the good son, all of it vanished as the police arrived. As the weight of what just happened settled heavily over everyone, Uncle Frank quickly stepped over and placed a hand on my shoulder with concern etched across his face. He gently pulled me slightly away from the scene and whispered urgently, "Ethan, listen to me. He's your father, that was wrong, terribly wrong, but think carefully about what you're doing. Don't make a decision out of anger that could tear this family apart forever. Are you sure there isn't another way?" I looked at Uncle Frank, someone I loved and respected, and saw the genuine conflict in his eyes. He belonged to a generation where you didn't air out family dirty laundry or cause drama, you kept peace at all costs. For a fleeting moment, I hesitated, the weight of his words and the tradition of family pressed down hard on me. Was he right? Was I about to set off an explosion that could never be undone? I glanced past him at my father, who was now arguing with a restaurant manager, completely without remorse, showing only indignation. Then I looked at my mother, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin and playing victim. My gaze shifted to Dylan, watching me with pure triumphant hatred, as if I had wronged him somehow. And finally, I looked at Grace, standing firm with eyes blazing with protective fire, ready to fight for me. The decision became clear: my old family was sinking, dragged down by ego and entitlement, and my new family was right in front of me. I turned back to Uncle Frank. I appreciated his concern but told him, "They tore this family apart a long time ago, I'm just not going down with them." As soon as the police officer, a calm, professional man named Officer Diaz, approached and asked what happened, I kept my voice steady and told him everything, the waiter's statement who called 911, Brooks' video evidence. Officer Diaz then turned to me, "Sir, your father claims this is just a family dispute. It's your call, do you want to press charges?" Every fiber of my being, the lessons about peace and forgiveness, screamed at me not to do it, to let it go, to walk away quietly. But I thought about all those years of feeling like second best, the casual cruelty, they had tried to sabotage our future together with Grace. Looking into the officer's eyes, I made my choice. "Yes," I said clearly and firmly. "Yes, I do." That one word slammed shut the door on my past, a loud resounding closing of a chapter one never wanted to reopen. But what I didn't realize then, and what nobody told me, is that it also marked the start of a war. The moment the handcuffs clicked around my father's wrists, a strange calm settled over everything, the busy restaurant faded into silence, it felt surreal. Gerald Miller, my dad, a man who built his entire identity around control and public image, was being led away by police from his son's engagement party. He didn't look scared or guilty, he looked indignant, a king betrayed in his own court, eyes locked onto mine with a look that wasn't shame but one of defiance and retribution. His glance said clearly, revenge would come soon enough. My mother trailed behind him, wailing loudly with dramatic sobs and accusations. "How could you do this to your own father?" she cried out loud enough for everyone to hear, "after everything we've done for you." Dylan simply stood there, fists clenched tight, face twisted into pure hatred as if I'd personally discovered some snake in his bed, and in his mind, my father's public humiliation was entirely my fault. My refusal to be just another obedient son was the ultimate betrayal. Of course, the party was over, people drifted away silently or exchanged awkward glances uncertain of what to say next. The Chens were incredible, they understood the gravity of what had happened. Dr. Leong placed a steadying hand on my shoulder and said sincerely, "We're with you, Ethan, 100%. Don't doubt that." Professor Green simply nodded at me with a grim look of approval in his eyes. Tyler stayed behind to help us smooth things over with the restaurant management, using his charm even in the middle of chaos, and Grace never left my side, she was my anchor amid all the turmoil. Later that night, back at our apartment, once the adrenaline finally subsided, I felt the full weight of what I'd done crashing down on me. The apartment seemed eerily quiet now, the congratulatory cards and gifts sitting untouched on the table mocking us all. I sank onto the couch and buried my face in my hands. For the first time since everything went down, my strength cracked apart entirely. "Grace," I whispered through muffled tears, "what did I just do?" My voice broke as I added, "He's my dad. I had him arrested." She sat beside me without hesitation, wrapping her arms around me tightly, not offering simple platitudes but just holding me close. My mind kept replaying everything, the slap, the arrest, the way they tried to sabotage our future together with Grace, and I wondered if there had been another way or if walking away might have been smarter. I whispered again into her shoulder, was there really no other way? Couldn't I have just walked away? Uncle Frank told me I was tearing apart our family by doing this, but Grace pulled back slightly and made me look directly into her fierce eyes. "Ethan," she said softly but firmly, "you didn't do this. A family isn't some kind of suicide pact where one person has to burn themselves alive just to keep everyone else warm." She explained that they'd been hurting me for years, tonight they did it publicly, and finally, enough was enough. "You didn't throw the first punch," she told me fiercely. "You simply decided not to be knocked out." Her words cut through the fog of guilt and doubt that clouded my mind. They were right, this wasn't just about money, it was about that slap, that message that said, "You're property, and we can do whatever we want to you." My choice to press charges was my way of sending a message back, "No, you can't treat me like that anymore." But honestly, I seriously underestimated how far my family would go in retaliation. I thought arresting Dad would shock them into realizing they'd gone too far, that it would be a wake-up call for everyone involved. Instead, it became an official declaration of war, their first move in their counterattack. About a week later, I got a call at work from Brian, my boss at Horizon Creative, the kind of guy who does everything by the book. His voice sounded uncomfortable as he asked, "Ethan, can you come by my office for a minute?" When I went in, he closed the door behind me, never a good sign, and handed me an envelope that looked serious and professional-sized. "I received this today," he said cautiously, avoiding eye contact as he held out the envelope. "It's from an attorney representing your father." My blood ran cold as I asked, "What is it?" He pushed the document across the desk, and I reached out to pick it up. It was printed on the letterhead of a high-end law firm, and as I started to read, my stomach sank. It wasn't a lawsuit demanding the $70,000, but something far more sinister, more calculated in its cruelty. The letter was a formal complaint directed to the leadership of Horizon Creative, crafted with twisted storytelling. It painted me as an unstable, aggressive, and vengeful son, referencing the public confrontation and framing my decision to call the police not as a response to an assault but as a deliberate act of elder abuse and public defamation meant to humiliate my father. It subtly suggested that my erratic behavior and poor judgment in personal matters made me a potential threat in a workplace that values stability and teamwork. They were attacking my livelihood, trying to poison the well so I'd become unemployable. My face went pale as I felt the blood leave my head. Brian sighed and said, "These are all lies." I looked at him, desperate for reassurance. "I know it seems that way, Ethan," he replied gently, "and for the record, your work here has always been excellent. But you have to understand our position, we have clients and a corporate image to protect. Situations like this are messy, so just be careful." The message was loud and clear, I was on thin ice. The letter was just the start. The next battlefront was social media. Dylan and his fiancée Brianna kicked off a full-blown smear campaign. They posted vague yet damaging updates about family betrayal and the pain of being stabbed in the back by those you should trust. They didn't use my name directly, but everyone in our circle knew exactly who they were talking about. Then things got even worse. An old cousin I hadn't spoken to in years called me, her voice dripping with misplaced sympathy. "Ethan, I'm so sorry to hear that Grace cheated on you and that your wedding's off," she said softly. "Your mom told me if you need anything, just let her know." I was stunned into silence. "What? That's not true," I blurted out. "We're still getting married." But the lie had already spread. Probably Dylan had made fake emails pretending to be me and sent them to distant relatives and old family friends, announcing that the wedding was cancelled because Grace was unfaithful. They even circulated a poorly photoshopped picture of Grace with some random guy, trying to make it look like she was on a date. It was a nasty, desperate move to isolate us, to turn our support system against us. Meanwhile, pressure at work was mounting, people were whispering behind my back, and I could feel their eyes on me in the hallways. A major project I was supposed to lead was quietly reassigned to a colleague without explanation. Grace was getting stressed too. Her own parents, although supportive of me, began to worry as well. Calls from their friends started spreading the poison. This was their plan. They couldn't beat me legally over money, so they aimed to break me mentally. They wanted to make my life so miserable that I dropped the charges against my father just to make it stop. One night, I sat staring at another hateful comment on Dylan's Facebook page, feeling utterly helpless. Tyler came over with a six-pack of beer and noticed the look on my face. "Don't let them win, man," he said firmly. "This is exactly what they want you to feel alone and overwhelmed." I admitted, "It's working." My voice trembling. "They're attacking Grace, they're attacking my job, what am I supposed to do?" Tyler pulled up a chair, his face serious now. "We don't get overwhelmed, we get smart." He explained that there are ways to trace that fake email, it's difficult but not impossible. His cousin, who worked in IT security, might be able to help. Tyler promised he'd make a call. A flicker of hope sparked inside me after weeks of just reacting defensively. Finally, I saw a way to fight back. This wasn't just about protecting myself anymore, they'd involved Grace and threatened our future together. My despair turned into cold determination, the kind of resolve that only comes when you're backed into a corner but refuse to stay there. If they wanted a war, then a war it would be, on my own terms. I wasn't going to let them win with lies and drama. I'd face them with something they'd never see coming, the unshakable truth. The moment I decided to fight back felt like flipping a switch in my mind. The fear and helplessness that had gnawed at me for weeks were replaced by sharp, focused anger. It wasn't like my father's reckless hot rage but a cold, calculated fury. They'd pushed me into this corner, now I was going to find a way out. Tyler's cousin, who knew her way around tech, gave us some tips. It wasn't as simple as clicking a button. Tracing a spoofed email meant dealing with nightmare-level complications. Dylan, despite all his scheming, wasn't some master hacker. He was just a spoiled brat with an internet connection who probably made mistakes along the way. So we started digging, spending our evenings not planning the wedding but analyzing email headers, learning about IP addresses and server logs. It was tedious work, frustrating as hell, but Grace kept us going, bringing coffee with worry etched across her face but also determination shining through. She was our researcher now, cross-referencing Dylan's social media activity with timestamps on those fake emails. At the same time, I knew we needed legal help, just not the kind of high-priced lawyers my father had on retainer. Our money from freelance gigs was meant for our business, not fighting off my own family. Then Tyler had an idea. Remember Naomi? He asked one night while leaning back from his laptop's glow. Naomi from our econ class, she'd gone to law school last I heard and worked as a paralegal at a small firm downtown. She was smart, quiet, sharp as hell. We weren't close friends but had studied together in a group once. It was a long shot, but it beat nothing. I found her on LinkedIn and shot her a message explaining everything and asking if she could give us some advice. To my surprise, she responded within an hour and agreed to meet us for coffee. Naomi wasn't some high-powered partner. She was young, hungry, and hated bullies just as much as we did. When we laid out the whole story, the slap at work, the arrest, the complaint letter to my boss, the smear campaign, her eyes hardened immediately. "What they're doing is classic harassment and defamation," she said sharply. Her tone was crisp and professional. "It's designed to cause maximum emotional and professional pain so you'll drop your main charge against your dad." She paused before adding, "They probably think you'll run out of money or energy before they do." She agreed to assist us with our case at a fraction of the usual cost, working beyond her regular hours. She described it as a passion project, she said with a small, grim smile. With Naomi guiding us, our efforts became more targeted. Our main goal was to build an undeniable mountain of evidence. We meticulously documented everything, every social media post, every text message from a confused relative, and we even obtained sworn statements from friends who had received the fake emails. We also began digging into one thing my family was always avoiding talking about: money. We spent hours at my bank, obtaining official statements for the wedding fund to trace its origin and the legal transfer that happened on my 21st birthday. Then, with a bit of help from Uncle Frank, who felt guilty for not supporting us earlier and now wanted to make amends, we did the same for Dylan. We managed to piece together a financial timeline that was pretty damning. It proved that my parents had given Dylan thousands of dollars, which he then funneled into failed crypto exchanges and paid for an outrageously expensive sports car he couldn't afford. The contrast between our finances was clear. My savings account showed years of steady, disciplined deposits, while his was full of huge cash infusions followed by reckless spending right afterward. After a week of hitting dead ends, Tyler finally found our breakthrough. It turned out Dylan had used a public Wi-Fi at a coffee shop to send one of the fake emails, but his phone had briefly connected to his personal cloud account, leaving behind a digital breadcrumb. That was the link we needed. We could now definitively connect the email account to Dylan Miller's personal account. It wasn't enough to convict him of a crime, but as Naomi explained, it was more than enough for what we needed. As we gathered all this evidence, a piece of information I'd tucked away in the back of my mind suddenly became relevant. I remembered a conversation from months ago. Before all this blew up, my dad had been bragging at a family dinner about a huge potential client that could turn everything around for his struggling consulting firm. Gerald Miller Consulting had been losing clients for years, and he was pinning all his hopes on landing a major contract with Northwind Corporation, a Fortune 500 company. "They're all about image and ethics," he boasted. "They only work with the best, most stable firms. This deal will put us back on the map." A plan started forming in my head, something risky and bold. Grace, with her marketing expertise, did a deep dive into Northwind. Their CEO, Thomas Whitaker, was a well-known corporate titan who championed business ethics and corporate responsibility. He'd written articles and given speeches about it. His entire brand was built on integrity. My father was trying to destroy my reputation just to save his own, using lies to make me look unstable. But what if I used the truth to reveal who their real potential partner truly was? I ran it by Grace and Naomi. Sure, it was a huge risk. It could be seen as petty revenge and might backfire badly. But Naomi saw it differently. "You're not attacking him," she advised. "You're protecting yourself. He sent a letter to your employer raising doubts about your stability. I believe you have every right to provide a clear and honest picture of your situation to potential business partners. It's not slander if what you're saying is true." So, we put together a calm, professional, yet completely devastating information package that included a summary of the events, a police report from the assault, copies of the posts from the smear campaign, evidence tracing the fake emails back to Dylan, contrasting financial records, and of course, the video of Grace's sister showing the slap. We didn't send it along with an angry note. Naomi drafted a cool, detached cover letter explaining that, as professionals working in the same city, she felt it was her ethical duty to share this information so they could be fully aware and make informed decisions about their business relationships. It was corporate judo, using my father's own language and world against him. We mailed the package via courier to Thomas Whitaker, CEO of Northwind Corporation. When I saw the delivery confirmation pop up on my phone, I felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. I just rolled the dice. I had no idea whether the CEO would even look at it or just toss it in the trash as the ramblings of a disgruntled kid. All I knew was that the fight had moved out of the court of public opinion and hushed office hallways. I had taken it right into my father's own world. I wasn't in the eye of the storm anymore, I was the storm. The weeks after sending that package to Northwind were the quietest but also the most nerve-wracking stretch of my life. It was like holding your breath underwater, waiting to see if you'd surface or if your lungs would burst. We heard nothing, no angry calls from my dad, no new attacks from Dylan. The silence was unsettling. So, we focused on planning our wedding, trying to regain some sense of normalcy, but that question still hung in the air: what was really going on behind the scenes? The answer came in the form of a thick cream-colored envelope, an invitation to the Gerald Miller Consulting Annual Client Appreciation Gala. That event was my father's biggest of the year, a fancy schmooze fest meant to impress clients and project success, even if everything was falling apart behind closed doors. Usually, an invite like that would get tossed immediately, but this one was different. Grace and I weren't invited by my dad. It came from one of Horizon Creative's vendors, a printing company that did work for both our firm and his. We had a legit reason to be there. "It's a trap," I said instantly, tossing it on the counter. Grace picked it up, her eyes gleaming with that strategic spark. "No," she said, "it's an opportunity. It's the perfect stage." She was right. This wasn't just any party, it was my father's entire world all gathered in one place. It was the Lion's Den, and we were about to walk right into it. On the night of the gala, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Standing in front of the mirror adjusting my tie, Grace came up behind me, her hands on my shoulders. "Whatever happens in there," she said softly, "we face it together." Her reflection met mine in the mirror. "We walk in with our heads high and we walk out the same way, no matter what," she added. Taking a deep breath, I squared my shoulders and headed out. The ballroom at the downtown hotel looked painfully elegant. Strings of music from a quartet played in one corner, waiters moved around with trays of champagne. Across the room, I saw my father holding court. He was laughing loudly, confidently, but his eyes didn't quite have that sparkle anymore. He looked thinner than I remembered, with deeper lines around his mouth from stress. My mom stood beside him in a sparkling dress, her smile brittle. Dylan was there too, looking smug with his third glass of champagne in hand. For the first hour, we played our parts, working the room, chatting with vendors who invited us, exchanging pleasantries with industry contacts. I could feel my father watching me. He hadn't approached us yet, he was just observing and waiting. The tension hung heavy in the air until the main event finally started. My father stepped onto the stage for his keynote speech. He stood at the podium, soaking in applause before launching into typical corporate platitudes. But then he took a personal turn, talking about resilience, about overcoming unexpected challenges in business and life. His tone grew somber as he mentioned betrayal from unexpected places and jealousy from younger generations who didn't appreciate what had been sacrificed for them. His words seemed aimed directly at me in front of all his peers, painting himself as a wise but wounded patriarch and casting me as an ungrateful villainous son. My fists clenched under the table, and I felt blood pounding in my ears. Just as he was about to launch into another spiel about family values, a man at the front table stood up, tall, silver-haired, radiating authority. I recognized him instantly from Grace's photos, Thomas Whitaker, CEO of Northwind Corporation. Suddenly, the room went silent. Interrupting the host during his speech was a major breach of etiquette. Whitaker's voice was calm but sharp as a razor. "Gerald, forgive me for interrupting," he said, "but your mention of values and betrayal has prompted me to make an announcement." My father's smile froze on his face, he looked utterly bewildered. Whitaker continued, sweeping his gaze across the room, "Northwind prides itself on partnering with firms that demonstrate integrity both professionally and personally. After reviewing some very troubling new information that recently came to light, we've decided to end our discussions about a partnership with Gerald Miller Consulting effective immediately." A wave of gasps and murmurs rippled through the ballroom. My father looked like he'd been hit with a punch, his face went pale, his mouth opened but no words came out. But Whitaker wasn't finished. His eyes scanned everyone before settling on me again. "Our commitment to integrity remains strong," he boomed slightly louder now. "That's why I'm pleased to announce we've just signed a major long-term contract with a young, dynamic firm, one that truly impresses us with talent and unwavering ethics." He raised his glass. "Please join me in congratulating Ethan Miller and his team at Horizon Creative." The room erupted into shock and confusion, every head turned toward me as if a spotlight had just shined directly on us. Grace squeezed my hand so tightly I thought my bones might break. Without hesitation, I stood up, legs unsteady but determined, and made my way toward the stage where my father still stood at the podium, looking utterly broken. His empire, the facade of power and prestige, had crumbled in less than a minute. As I approached him, I leaned in close and whispered just loud enough for him to hear, "You taught me that in business, reputation is everything," I said softly. "I'm just using that lesson." Without waiting for any reply, I walked past him toward Thomas Whitaker and shook his hand firmly. I didn't look back, I didn't need to, I could feel my father's world crashing down behind me as I left. The sound in that room was deafening, a chaotic blur of whispers and sideways glances as we quietly slipped out after shaking Mr. Whitaker's hand and accepting his congratulations with a poise I didn't even know I had. The image of my father's pale, hollowed-out face, and his entire false front shattered, was burned into my mind forever. The drive home was silent, we both sat there processing how huge that moment had been, not just a victory but a public vindication beyond anything I'd ever imagined. My father hadn't just lost a contract, he'd lost his reputation, the one thing he valued above all else, the very currency he'd built his empire on, and now he was a pariah. When we got back to our apartment, Grace and I just stood silently in the living room for a moment before laughter suddenly escaped my lips. It started small but quickly turned into full-blown laughter that shook me inside. Grace joined in immediately. Soon enough, tears streamed down our faces as we laughed for relief from months of pressure finally released after being pushed to breaking point. In the weeks after everything happened, the fallout hit fast and hard. News spread quickly through the business world about Gerald Miller Consulting's humiliating public disgrace at their own gala and Horizon Creative's swift rise to success. Clients who still worked with my father began pulling away, they didn't want any part of that scandal. 2 months later, our wedding day arrived, and it couldn't have been more different from our engagement party. It was perfect. We held it outdoors at a stunning botanical garden with just our closest friends, those who truly stood by us through everything, the people who felt like family now. Of course, we hired discreet security just in case, but otherwise, everything was peaceful, no outbursts or confrontations like before. Dylan and my parents were nowhere to be seen. It was as if that toxic cloud had finally lifted and allowed some sunlight through. During the reception, my Uncle Frank came over to me, his eyes filled with quiet respect, and pulled me into a hug. "I was wrong, Ethan," he whispered softly, voice thick with emotion. I was so focused on keeping our family from breaking apart that I didn't see it was already broken. He looked at me with honest pride, then added, "You did what you had to do, you stood up for yourself, and I'm proud of you." When I heard those words from him, coming from the man who embodied the traditional values I had been forced to challenge, it felt like a final piece of healing clicking into place. Tyler and Dr. Liang's speeches weren't just your typical wedding toasts, they were heartfelt tributes to resilience, integrity, and the strength of building a life rooted in mutual respect. The entire day seemed less like a wedding and more like a celebration of survival and victory. A few weeks after we got back from our honeymoon, Grace and I finally signed the papers for our first apartment. It wasn't a mansion, just a cozy 2-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood with big windows that let in plenty of morning sunlight. The $70,000, the money that had sparked this whole battle, went into the down payment. On that first night in our new place, surrounded by boxes, we ordered pizza and ate it sitting on the floor. I held the new keys in my hand, feeling their cool weight. This was real, this was ours. We had built this ourselves, not with inherited money or handouts, but through our own hard work and the courage to fight for what was right. The money was just a symbol, the real prize was the ability to turn that key in our own lock and create a sanctuary free from the toxicity of the past. The final confirmation of my father's downfall didn't come with a loud bang but rather with a quiet email. Tyler sent me a link to a local business journal's website. The headline was short and direct: Gerald Miller consulting files for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. I read the article, which laid out everything in cold, clinical business language: mounting debts, loss of key clients, inability to secure new funding. Of course, there was no mention of the family drama behind it, but I knew the truth. I understood the real reason behind every single one of those words. I didn't feel triumphant or joyful, instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of quiet finality. It was over. The war was truly finished. A year can change everything. 12 months after the bankruptcy notice, the world looked entirely different. The Northwind contract had propelled Horizon Creative, and my own career, like a rocket engine. Grace and I took that momentum and ran with it. We pooled our savings, took out a small business loan, and left Horizon to start our own agency, Miller Chin Design. It was a risky move, but it felt completely natural. We were a team in life, and now we were a powerhouse team in business. She was the strategic genius, a brilliant marketer who could charm any client. I was the creative force, turning her strategies into striking visual campaigns. We worked long hours, fueled by coffee and a shared dream, and it paid off. Our little agency began to grow and thrive. We were building something entirely ours. But the best part of that year had nothing to do with business at all. 8 months after our wedding, our daughter Zoe was born. Holding her for the first time, the tiny, perfect human she was, completely recalibrated my entire universe. All the anger and bitterness I'd carried toward my father started to fade away. They didn't disappear completely, but they lost their grip on me. Instead, I felt an overwhelming, fierce need to protect this new life, to give her the love and security I'd never known myself. I hadn't heard from my parents or my brother since that gala. That was a clean break. I sent them a formal birth announcement mostly out of a sense of duty more than anything else, expecting no reply, and I was right. Their silence felt like a gift. Then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon, there was a knock at the door of our small office. I opened it, and my breath caught in my throat. Standing there was my mother. I hadn't seen her in over a year. She looked diminished, her expensive clothes hung loosely on her frail frame. The proud, defiant look in her eyes had been replaced by deep weariness and sadness. The lines on her face told stories of stress and defeat. I hesitated before saying her name, Linda, which felt strange to use now because "Mom" just didn't fit anymore.